Well, hello, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you may be. For those of you that don't know, my name is Frank Leone, and I am one of the two members of the 77 group. And this week, I'm going to be taking chapter 33 of my book, and it's called If You Are in Charge, Control the Meeting. And just as a very, very brief overview, what this basically means is that the odds are, if you're not doing it already, or if you haven't done it sometime in the past, that at some point you will be held with the responsibility to lead a meeting. It can be a meeting of 3 or 4 people. It can be a meeting of a couple dozen. It could be a meeting of hundreds of people. But sooner or later, most of us in our professional careers or personal lives have the opportunity to lead meetings. And I have learned through experience, and to some degree trial and error, that there's a certain art to leading meetings effectively, and that's what chapter 33 of my book talks about, and that's what I'll be talking about in today's episode.
Well, thanks, Frank. This is a great chapter, so get comfortable and pay attention because I know Frank's got a lot of great nuggets to share with us today. And my name's Mitch Goddard. I am Frank's partner in the 77 group, and welcome to our YouTube channel experience. We're very excited to have you along today. I think our subscriber count is well over 400 subscribers, and this is, something we've done very quietly, and to see our subscriber base grow is very exciting and inspiring for us. So tell your friends, let's keep this party going. And share the word for us. Now, our each episode that we do here on YouTube mirrors one chapter from Frank's book on communication. By the way, that's titled 77 Ways to Perfect Your Communication Skills, Enhancing Your Personal and Professional Relationships. So he's got 77 chapters. He works on the odd weeks, and I've got 77 chapters for my book. I work on the even weeks, and my book's on leadership. And that book is due out later this year, and it's entitled 77 Principles, Tips, and Takeaways for Exceptional Leaders. And so between the two of us, we've got 77 chapters in each one of those books, 154 chapters in all. And every week, we bring one of those chapters to you where we expand a little more, share a little more insight. And it really is a good companion for those of you that have the book. And I think it also, our YouTube presentations do well to stand alone on their own. So if you have the book, it pairs up great with the YouTube channel. If you have just one or the other, you're still ahead of the game. So each episode also features a question of the week, where the subject matter expert, this week Frank talking about communication, will select a question of the week from a past episode, and the winner gets a free phone call, 15, 20-minute phone call to just chat, do a little deeper dive on the subject matter, or share a little insight, some advice, whatever it might be. We're here for you. This is an opportunity for both Frank and I to give something back to people because between the two of us, believe it or not, we've got over a century's worth of experience in both communication and leadership. And our whole goal is just to share it with our viewers and our readers. And, why not subscribe? It doesn't cost you a thing. Also, if you like what you see, not only tell your friends, but hit that like button down below the screen there. And of course, share your comments. We love the interaction. And again, we love those questions as well. So now let's send it back over to Frank, who again will be talking about communication this week, episode 17. If you're the leader, control the meeting. Back to you, Frank.
You got it. And my pleasure to talk about this very compelling topic. And again, I think that at some point, if you haven't already, the odds are very good you'll be vested with the responsibility and best to do it effectively. But in any event, my history as a person leading meetings literally goes back to high school. And I remember very clearly I was in a high school fraternity. And at the time, in our high school at least, fraternities were extremely big and extremely important. And I was the vice president of that fraternity. And one time the president wasn't there and I had to lead the meeting at the last second. I found that out. And I remember I was very apprehensive about it. But I went ahead and did. And I found that I remember it very well. I remember the kind of room I was in. I remember where I was standing in that room. And I remember clearly that it was a lot easier and a lot more fun than I feared it would be. And then as my career went along, I led meetings of various sizes. Probably the most common variant was as the president of Ryan Associates, the company that I was president of for 31 years. I led staff meetings at least once a week, sometimes more often. But it really wasn't until about 10 years ago that I was vested with the responsibility of leading. I was the main person in a large community nonprofit group here in Santa Barbara. And we met once a month, and I was in office for 3 years. So basically 36 times I led the meeting. And I remember very clearly, the first thing I said at the first meeting was 2 points. Point number one was that I was going to strive to not dominate these meetings, but to do everything in my power to make sure that the meetings were held as a group of equals. And number two, I said that it was up to us as a group to determine if we want to go through the motions and deal with the issues at hand in a business-like but not overly passionate manner, or if we really wanted to strive for greatness and make that extra effort. And everything that I did for the next 3 years was geared toward both of those aims. So I want to share, I could probably give 25 tips on this topic, but I want to share 5 of the tips that I have. You ready for tip number 1, Mitch?
Yeah, Frank, hit us with tip number 1. What do you got?
Tip number 1 is offer 3 date and time options. And what I basically mean here is that a meeting is going to be dead on arrival if you don't get the right players and enough players there to participate in that meeting in the first place. So step number 1 is don't randomly select a date and a time and say, hey, there's a meeting, everybody, please come. But rather reach out to those that are coming to the meeting and find the closest thing to a consensus day and time that's going to work for that meeting. And I think it needs to be done on 2 different tiers. The first tier is, let's say there's 15 people that are going to come to the meeting, and that 3 of those 15 are the really super key people. So the first thing I would recommend doing is going to those 3 and basically saying, okay, what times and dates do not work for you next week? Don't ask them what's best. Ask them just to rule out what they cannot do. And what is left, then you have those as your options to throw out to the greater group. Then within those options, it's a good idea to throw out at least 3 sub-options to everybody else in the group, because you already know that it works for you and the other key 3 people, and ask them, of these 3, are there any that you cannot do? Don't ask them what their favorite is. Just ask them what they cannot do. And then at that point, you put together the best quorum you can on the date and time that works for the most number of people. You already know going in, you and the other 3 most significant people, I shouldn't say significant, but that must be there people it already works for. So the point being very simply that you want to make sure that you schedule a meeting that brings forth as many of the hoped for players of that meeting as possible.
Well, and that makes good sense, Frank. So, and as you're saying that, I'm wondering, does it make sense to have a standing meeting where everybody can mark it on their calendar moving forward? Hey, Tuesdays at 8 a.m. is our status meeting, for instance. Would that make sense to do that?
Well, I mean, yes and no. There's 2 different scenarios out there. Scenario number 1 is there's a lot of meetings that are called because the meeting's necessary for an issue at hand. Another is that it's part of a team and the team's got to meet on a continuous basis. So both of those make sense depending upon the nature of the meeting.
Sure.
Okay?
Okay. And I think you really nailed it. Start with the key people, and that may also change on a weekly basis or a periodic basis, depending on the topic matter at hand and so on. So anyway, great points all. What do you got for tip number 2, Frank?
Tip number 2 is schedule meetings early in the day to minimize conflicts. My point here is simply this. Objective number 1 is to set it at a time when most people can come. Objective number 2 is have it at a time when fewer people will have last-minute conflicts and either can't come or are going to come painfully late. And as I'll mention in a future tip in this episode, as well as go into it in some depth in the book, you don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're typically starting meetings 10 to 15 minutes late as you wait for stragglers to get there. You're wasting a lot of valuable time for a lot of valuable people. You want to start at the minute that meeting's supposed to start. So the earlier in the day that you schedule the meeting, the better. Back in my Ryan Associates days, 31 years of being the president of a company, our meetings were always at 8 a.m. They were actually at 8 a.m. on Monday morning every week. We got close to significant events like our national conferences, and we would do them multiple times a week or maybe even every day for a week or so, as we had so much on the table. But my feeling was to have staff meeting first thing in the day, the first day of the week. It's basically everybody's marching orders for the week, and then let everybody sort of go on their way. You can check in from time to time, but give people the respect that once we've gotten together and determined this is our plan for the week, give people the confidence to execute that plan. So I really like 8 a.m. as a starting time, and in some cases earlier than that. If it's something where you're in a healthcare facility and you have people that have patient care issues and so forth at 8 o'clock, well, that becomes a non-starter. So how about 7 o'clock once a week? It's the way it's got to be. People can get there somehow or other. This is your business. It's important. But again, the important thing is no 8-11s. 8 a.m. means 8 a.m. And I might add one additional thing here. And it may sound stringent, and I mention it in the book, but I would literally get to the point where I would not let people in if they arrived after 8 a.m. You're doing a couple things here. Number one, you're walking your walk. You're letting people know that indeed they have to be there at 8 o'clock. It's not a suggestion. Because of the suggestion, then all of a sudden you can start getting those 8-11 people again. But if you say, look, I'm sorry, this is an important meeting. We all have a lot of other things to do. We're not going to waste the time. If you're not here by 8 o'clock, we'll send you the minutes of the meeting, but you're not going to be there. Guess what happens? People are always there at 8 o'clock. Guess what happens number 2? They're much more serious about that meeting because they know right from the start that the gauntlet has been laid down, that this is an important meeting and we are going to do this professionally and as smoothly and in consideration for all of our fellow people at the meeting as well. I don't want a meeting with 12 people with 10 of them to be sitting there waiting for the other 2 people to mosey on in. Not fair to 10 people, 10 minutes of their time times 10 is almost an hour of, 10 times 10 is an hour and 40 minutes of cumulative staff time. And that's a waste of valuable time, so you don't want to do that. So step number 2 is schedule meetings early in the day to minimize conflicts.
Yeah, and that's such a great message to send. Little discipline. People, like you say, they show up on time, and by and large, I bet they show up prepared to jump right in and get after it. And efficient use of time, good discipline, professionalism, respect for everybody else in the room. Great tip, Frank. What do you got for...
And Mitch, I might add one little extra thing to that.
Sure.
When you do that, you sort of create a culture that is focused on professionalism.
Yep.
And that's very important as well. And it's a small little thing. Hey, no 8-11, 8 o'clock. What are you doing? You have a meeting from 7 to 8? Are you going to be on a phone call that you can't get off of? It's possible, but it's far less likely than if the meeting was scheduled at 11 a.m. And that creates a positive culture, and that people really know what to take seriously and what to not take seriously with their business. It can be a professional business, it can be a community group, whatever it is, respect people's time.
Amen. Amen. Yeah, and like you say, it puts that culture of professionalism in place. And I remember the old stories about Coach Vince Lombardi. There was a Lombardi time, right? So if the meeting was set for 8 a.m., you needed to be in your seat ready to go at 7:50. Otherwise, the door was locked and you were considered late, and you had to deal with Lombardi's wrath. I'm sure nothing like that strict went on at Ryan Associates, but it sends a good message, and people adhere to that. And what do you know? Productive meetings and professionalism reign throughout the organization. So great tip, Frank.
Yeah, Mitch, I did make them run 20 laps during the meeting.
Right.
They couldn't get in the door.
Well, and that's good. So now you've got not only discipline, professionalism, but a good fit group.
Indeed.
Going to work every day. All right, so let's move to tip number 3.
Tip number 3, strictly adhere to an end time. One thing to start at 8 o'clock, but so many meetings start at 8 o'clock and end when they end. Well, guess what happens? People are looking at their watch, they have places to go, they have other things on their mind, they have a 9 o'clock phone call, and people start wandering out at different times. Sometimes very important people. I'd be at meetings sometimes, things that, as a consultant, working with the healthcare industry, hospitals, healthcare systems, I was often in rooms with lots of senior people from a healthcare system. And it was amazing how many people are looking at their watches and heading out the door early. And it could be the CEO of the health system. And I'm saying, oh man, I can't believe he's leaving. I have an important couple points I haven't gotten to yet. So what I like to do is not only offer a very solid starting time, but to offer an absolute ending time. That this meeting is going to begin at 8 o'clock, but it is going to be over not a second after 9 o'clock. And therefore people can plan. There's no excuse for somebody running out for another meeting because they know that they're not getting out of that room until 9 o'clock, but they won't get out of the room at 9:01 either. So it's really important to do that. How do you make that happen in an hour? Well, first of all, an hour is a lot of time if you're a crisp leader in putting together that meeting and managing that meeting. But what I like to do is and what I've done is that I would put together an agenda for everybody. Here's the 10 points that we are going to be covering during this hour, and put a specific time next to each of those. Yep. 8:05, 8:12, 8:17, 8:24, whatever it may be, and held no prisoners when it came to it being 8:24 and saying, well, it's 8:24, we got to move on to the next point, and maybe take an extra minute if we're in a real significant part of the conversation. But have you ever noticed in meetings, you can have an agenda and some very important points are at the end, and you rush through them or never even get there. And you don't want to take that chance. You want to make sure that things are apportioned appropriately. And I found, especially in leading this nonprofit group that I talked about here in Santa Barbara about 10 years ago for 3 years, that we always, our meetings were from 6:15 to 7:30 at night. And doggone it, at 7:30, I used to look at my watch and sort of smile and say, well, we're 6 seconds early or something like that. But people were sort of amazed that it worked out that way. But that was my job as a good communicator in leading that meeting. So strictly adhere to an end time.
Yeah, and great points. Again, showing respect for everyone's time. And also showing respect to the agenda or the subject matter. If it's important enough to get on the agenda, it's important enough to cover during the meeting, and sticking to that. That way, there's nothing hanging out in the parking lot where that's not being dealt with that could turn into a critical matter later. Excellent points there, Frank. We ready for number 4?
I'm ready for number 4. Tip number 4 is proactively involve everyone. And to me, that's a critical role of a meeting facilitator, is to make sure that everybody from, I think I used the word, what's the word that I use in the chapter? Not quite blabbermouth, but there's some word, there's a word in there you may remember from the chapter, Mitch, yourself, when a person just tries to take control of meetings. You want to get past those people and give everybody an opportunity. So I did two things in order to facilitate that. One is I would never let a point end without asking the question, does anybody else have anything to say about this matter? If the answer is no, I let it go. If somebody does, then provided there's time on the agenda, I get that out. So that's the first of the two things. The second is, especially for a very important topic, again, I try to apportion my time so I save a minute or two for it within context of that subtopic, is I will go around the room and I'll say, okay, I want to go around the room and ask each person what their final thought is on this. And I'll say, okay, Mitch, what are you thinking? Jerry, what are you thinking? Janie, what are you thinking? And go around and ask everybody. And sometimes I'll even say, each of you just try to take about 15 seconds. That's all we have time for. But let me know what your final thought is. We value your thought. Many things. First of all, sometimes the quietest person in the room has the best ideas. So you want to bring it out of them, bring it into the meeting. I think that's very important. But the other thing, and I know Mitch is going to talk about it next week, but is letting people know how much you value them and how much you value their opinion. And indeed you do. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't, any accomplishments that I had either with my own company or this nonprofit group or in other settings was a composite of what I contributed as well as what others contributed. So number 4, proactively involve everyone.
Amen. And I think the word you were looking at, I quickly scanned over the chapter. I think the word you were looking for was meandering. Someone who is meandering in their part of the discussion, where you have to reel them back in.
Well, that's a good word, certainly.
Well, came from your book. Good.
That's why it was a good word.
Right. Okay, sir. What do we have for tip number 5?
Tip number 5 is focus on your meeting objectives. And again, meetings can often fall off the rails. And again, it's the most pompous person in the room can often lead you astray to their pet topic. And so you want to focus on meeting objectives. But how do you do that? What's the best thing to do? What advice do I give people for getting that done? Well, number 1 is, by God, right at the top of the agenda that you're handing out, have meeting objective. It could be a single one, it could be 1, 2, and 3. This is our goal for getting together for this hour. And then you want to state that right at the outset as well. Or in different contexts throughout my communications book, I talk about how important it is up front to always state your objective, whether it's a telephone call, a one-on-one meeting, a small meeting with a group of people, a public presentation, whatever it may be. Start off right out of that starting gate with why you're there, what you're there to talk about, what the objective is. So you definitely want to state that objective up front, and always go back to it. And don't be shy about saying, well, we want to get back on point here. Where we're really trying to get with this is how we're going to handle the marketing of the new product. So let's get back on track. And you got to be strong about that. Being strong does not mean being dominant. I can be strong and forceful and in control by saying, let's get back on track. But I'm letting the people in the room do most of the talking. I'm not dominating the discussion. And I'm listening to them, and I'm leading them further to get further information about what they're thinking. So tip number 5, focus on meeting objectives. And maybe I can just repeat the 5 tips, if I may.
Sure, go right ahead, Frank, and they will roll.
They should be scrolling.
Did you do that?
Okay. Tip number 1 is offer 3 date and time options. Tip number 2 is schedule meetings early in the day to minimize conflicts. Tip number 3 is strictly adhere to an end time. Tip number 4 is proactively involve everyone. And tip number 5 is focus on meeting objectives.
Great tips all, and I hope everybody took some notes, or you can replay this, because again, sooner or later, you're likely going to find yourself in front leading a meeting, and Frank really nails it in this chapter. Also, again, another great example where the skill of a good leader and the skill of a good communicator intersect, which is why both points marry up so well together with the work that Frank and I present to you each week. So next week's topic I will take the lead, and that topic is love as you lead. I think I got to double check here. Lead with love. There we go.
You got it.
Just my notes. Had to cheat there. So anyway, that's coming next week. That's right. I'm talking about love and why it's important for leaders to have a loving heart in order to be an exceptional leader. And also, please remember to subscribe, tell your friends so they don't miss an episode, and hit that like button if you like what you see. Send us your comments and your questions, because we reward the question of the week each week. And this week, I suspect Frank has a winner. Who do you got for the question of the week, Frank?
Well, the name of the person is, at least the name that I got, is George Montana. And I don't know if that means the guy's name is Montana, his first name is George, maybe Joe Montana's son, or maybe it's a guy named George who's from Montana. But whoever you are, Mr. Montana, I liked your question. And it refers back to the episode I did a couple weeks ago, which was entitled Qualify, Always Qualify. And the question that Mr. Montana had is, what if qualifying remarks come across as being hesitant or unsure of yourself? And it's sort of a good comment, a good question, because one of the things that I really stressed in episode 15, those of you that have seen it, is that it is very important to hedge your bets, to be particularly conscious of not saying things are cast in concrete, not telling people they must do, they have to, that this is a fact, but to qualify things with such phrases as, in my opinion, or if I were you, or in my experience, I learned that, things of that sort. So what I'm gathering George is asking me here is sometimes that could come across as a little bit lacking in confidence. And the way I would respond to George is that so much is a continuum out there. We're not living in a world of black and white. We're living in a world of nuance in between. And on one side of the continuum in this issue is being absolute. You must do this. On the other side of the continuum is, gee, consider a lot of options, you might consider that. Somewhere in between, depending upon the issue, is where you want to go. But you never want to go fully to this side of the spectrum, because unless you're telling somebody, well, 2 and 2 is 4, you can count on it, the odds are that you are dealing with opinion, albeit perhaps very well-informed opinion, rather than fact. So, George, thank you very much. I should say on the top of the screen my 77 group email address, frank@77grp.com, should be showing on the screen right now. And George, I invite you to send me an email. Let me know if and when you would like to have a little call on the telephone, because that's what we give to the winning questions each week. So that's my answer to George. Mitch.
George Montana could be a famous quarterback or something, or related to Joe Montana. Anyway, folks, we also like to close each session with a thought of the week, a closing thought. And this week, Frank's got something special for us. What do we have, Frank?
4 words: adjust others' inadequacies. Something that I stressed in an earlier personal remark was how important it is to look for the good in everybody. And that's certainly true. But in everybody, and I mean everybody, certainly including the 2 humble servants that are on this end of the line, We have inadequacies, we make mistakes, we err, we have faults, we're human beings. And as important as it is to look for the good in everybody and to call out that good, to acknowledge that good, it's also important to notice when they're falling short and try to be sensitive and compassionate to those failings, because we're all finite human beings that make errors. So it's very important when you're dealing with anybody, when you're communicating with anybody, if that somebody is not meeting your expectations, give them a break, give them the benefit of the doubt. So that's my personal remark for the week.
Excellent stuff, Frank. As always, and again, a little forgiveness, a little forbearance isn't going to kill you. So use that understanding, share a little compassion. It'll come back to you, most likely. Great point, Frank. All right, folks. Well, that wraps up episode number 17 of the 77 group here on YouTube. We're so grateful you joined us today. Continue to tell your friends, have them subscribe, be a part of the family, and join us next week right here on the 77 group.
And I want to thank everybody as well. And I don't know if we really mentioned this in adequate depth, but want to remind everybody that they should take a hard look at the possibility of ordering my book, 77 Ways to Enhance Your Communication Skills. Over my shoulder back there, there's 3 copies of it. And over Mitch's shoulder, there are 2 copies. So we have 5 on our respective screens. But up on the top of the screen, there's our website again, www.77grp.com. You can order that way, but I'm also very happy to say that it is available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com and many, many other platforms right now. Hardcover is available, softcover is available, ebook is available, and the ebook selling for $5.99. So a very, very affordable price point for those that have budgetary limitations. And the audiobook should be available by the time this is available to you as well. So I'm very proud of it. It's got wonderful reviews, and it really is a good companion document to all of these YouTube presentations. But anyhow, thank you very, very much. I'll see you in 2 weeks. I'll see you next week with Mitch, but I'll see you back in 2 weeks when I'm doing episode 19, which is Show Your Audience Sincere Appreciation. So thank you. We greatly value your being with us. Thanks.